Normally, these meetings are chaired by Richard Astell, but he's on holiday. So we're privileged instead to have as our chair today, Councillor Bridget Smith, and she will tell us about some of her many responsibilities in the discussion session at the end. Meanwhile, her responsibility is to ensure that our speakers all keep to their allotted time of 10 minutes. So over to you, Bridget.
Thank you very much indeed, and thank you for inviting me to do this. It's a huge privilege. I will try to do as well as Richard does. It'll be a difficult job. So it's lovely to see so many familiar faces, quite a lot of you who I haven't seen for ages, and I do hope this time next year we're doing this in person so we can all enjoy a cup of coffee together. So we've got a really, really interesting programme of speakers. We're going to start off with Hannah Phillips from the RSPB, and actually I had the privilege of hearing Hannah speak to the Climate and Environment Committee at South Cambridgeshire District Council, of which I'm the leader, yesterday. And I never tire of hearing her talk about the exciting projects that RSPB are leading on. So I'm going to let Hannah talk for as long as she needs. If you want to ask Hannah any questions, if you could put them in the chat, please. And Helen's going to sort of feed the questions through to me. So please put the questions in as you think of them. And then we will take some questions of Hannah after she's spoken. Then we're going on to our other 6 speakers. And they're going to be restricted to 10 minutes each. And so speakers, I'll give you a 1-minute warning at 9 minutes, okay? Just so we can keep everything tight. And what we will do is we will take questions in blocks of 3 speakers. So there'll be two lots of more questions. And then I see I'm doing a summary and a conclusion. So you're going to have to help me with that by feeding in lots of really interesting questions and comments so that I can summarize what we've heard today as effectively as possible. So please everybody mute unless you're speaking. So Hannah's the only person who should have a microphone on. Please get typing in the chat. And Hannah, welcome, and over to you.
Thank you for that introduction, Bridget. I'm just going to share my screen. Oh, Helen, are you driving for me?
I had assumed as you'd sent me the slides that I would be, but
no, that is absolutely wonderful. Please do.
Let's just make sure that we're operational.
That's great.
Is that the first slide? Yeah.
That's the first slide. Yeah, thanks, Helen. Well, morning, everyone, and a huge thanks to Peter for inviting me along to speak to you this morning. I thought I'd give you a bit of a virtual tour of RSPB's work within the county. So I think the first thing to mention is that we manage 5 brilliant wetland nature reserves in Cambridgeshire, and these sites are places where we manage and create habitat for priority wildlife, including priority species like bittern, black-tailed godwit, breeding waders like the snipe, beautiful snipe pictured in this photo. Oh, I wonder if you can just make sure that you're muted. I could hear something coming through there, but I think that's stopped. Lovely. So outside of our nature reserves, we work with land managers to promote wildlife-friendly farming measures, and we also advocate for policies to really benefit nature and also provide people with improved access to nature for people. We also work hard to ensure that development respects environmental limits and provides benefits to nature and people through our casework team. And within Cambridgeshire, we do have a particular focus on the Fens, as that's where some of our best remaining sites for nature are within the county, and also where perhaps some of the biggest opportunities are for nature restoration. Next slide, please, Helen.
Okay, just bear with.
So The first project that I'm going to talk about is the Hanson RSPB Wetland project. This is creating Ouse Fen Nature Reserve between Erith and Needingworth, and it's a nature after minerals project whereby the RSPB are creating wetland habitat after the removal of sand and gravel for the minerals industry, which is carried out by Hanson. Oh,
I can't hear because there's somebody's not muted and it's a lot of background noise.
That sounds like it's better for me. I can see a few people nodding. Yes, if you can just make sure when you join that you're muted, that would be wonderful. So this is Ouse Fen Nature Reserve, which is being created with the Hanson RSPB Wetland project. It's currently 300 hectares in size, but when it's completed, it'll be 700 hectares in size, making it the biggest restoration project of its type in Europe. And it will also contain Britain's biggest reed bed. Now the map on the left shows the progress of the restoration. So the black numbers on there are the numbers of the cells, and cells 1 to 9 have already been handed over to the RSPB and form part of the nature reserve. Cells 10 to 16 are still part of the active quarry and will be handed over to the RSPB between now and 2031. And as well as being a really important site for nature, the site also will have lots of public access trails for people to enjoy. And I actually think it's one of the few places in the county where you can visit and really get that sense of wilderness and being alone with nature. So I just can't wait to see what it's like when it's twice the size that it currently is. Next slide, please, Helen. So hopefully you'll be able to see this video. For those of you that haven't been to Ouse Fen, hopefully this will give you a bit of an idea of the sense of scale of the site. And the site is already really delivering for the key species that we hoped it would. So we have double figures of bitterns breeding on site, marsh harrier breeding on site, bearded tit, and also a nice pair of common crane as they continue to make their comeback in the Fens. Next slide, please, Helen. The RSPB are also the delivery partner for the government's Ouse Washes Habitat Creation Project, working in partnership with the Wildlife Trust and WWT. This is creating wetland habitat adjacent to the Ouse Washes. The Ouse Washes is an internationally important wetland site, but flooding of the Ouse Washes in spring and summer causes big problems for ground nesting birds like snipe, lapwing, redshank and godwits that nest on the Ouse Washes. And this flooding results in a decline of those important priority species. So we're working with the government to create these sites adjacent to the Ouse Washes, which crucially don't flood during the spring and summer, so that the important bird life of the Ouse Washes has somewhere to nest when breeding is prevented on the Ouse Washes as a result of flooding. And as well as delivering for the birds by re-wetting the peatland soils that these sites are on, this also reduces our emissions from our precious peat resources. And it's estimated that re-wetting peat soil in this way can reduce emissions by up to 39 tonnes of carbon per hectare per year. And just to put that into context, one broadleaf tree sequesters 1 tonne of carbon during its lifetime. So you can see that our wetlands do have a really crucial and critical role to play in our response to the climate crisis. Next slide, please, Helen. And then in the south of the county, we have the small and very well-loved Falmere Nature Reserve. Many of you will be very aware of the issues affecting our chalk streams, and Falmere is a site that is particularly affected. The site is supplied by water from chalk springs, and the chalk river Shep runs through the site. and a lack of water supply to the wetland can cause significant issues. So as you can see in this picture, this is supposed to be the reed bed at Falmere, but you can see there's only a tiny pool of water in the middle there. Lack of water can cause us really significant issues on the site. And in fact, it's only as a result of pumping by the Environment Agency that, that the site hasn't dried up completely in recent years. So over the next few years, we've got plans to undertake infrastructure work on site to help improve our ability to store and move water around the site, as well as supporting the ongoing advocacy efforts to address the underlying issues of unsustainable water use and abstraction within the catchment. Next slide, please, Helen. So I've spoken a lot today about habitat creation and improvement, which is a big area for us, but I think it's really important also to acknowledge how important nature is for people and communities too. And I wanted to share some statistics from a report that was commissioned by the RSPB into the attitudes towards nature for people during the coronavirus crisis. And I think it's just nice to have some statistics that back up what we already know, and that is that nature is, you know, fundamental for our own well-being and happiness. So 89% of people agreeing that increasing the amount of green space would deliver benefits to their health, their well-being and happiness. And it's actually really unusual to get such high percentage scores like this through polls of this type. So really important, I think, to just to underpin our work with the support that we know we have from people for creating nature-rich green space. And the report also highlighted some of the big inequities in accessing nature, with poorer households being 3 times more likely to have absolutely no outdoor green space where they live, which is obviously not very good at all. Next slide, please, Helen. So we want to see an increase in the amount of nature-rich green space within the county, and we also want to see improved access to existing green space. So this is Fender Lakes. It's another ex-mineral site that's been returned to nature, and it is the only RSPB nature reserve in the UK to have its own guided busway stop, which is particularly good if you're playing nature reserve top trumps. So we've got plans here. We're currently developing plans to really improve the visitor facilities that we have on site, and all of this work is in development. So if you have any thoughts and ideas, do please get in touch with us about that. Next slide, please, Helen. We also undertake advocacy work to ensure that policies benefit nature, and we also undertake casework to defend important sites for nature. So an example of this would be our work on the Cllr, where we're working with a number of organisations, many of whom are on the call today, to advocate for improved environmental outcomes. We want to see nature restored across the Cllr. I think it's important to say that we're not anti-development, but it is really important that development within the county respects environmental limits, and that the impacts that development can have on the environment are assessed both cumulatively, and particularly when we see lots of developments coming through, and strategically. So there is currently a public consultation on the Cllr, and if you want to add your voice to the RSPB and other organisations, you can take part in our e-action, which is on the RSPB website. Next slide, please, Helen. Now, it wouldn't be an RSPB talk if I didn't say something about birds and show some cute pictures of bird chicks. So within Cambridgeshire, we still do have some really core populations of important bird species, particularly bittern and black-tailed godwit and turtle dove. So Cambridgeshire, about 90% of the entire breeding population of black-tailed godwits breed in the Fens, and they're only found at a handful of sites. So we're working with Wildfowl and Wetland Trust on Project Godwit to help boost their numbers using head starting, which involves rearing chicks in captivity and then releasing them into the wild. If you could just click the next button, Helen, there should be a little graph that should pop up, hopefully. There it is. And so far, the project has been really successful. So we had over 50 pairs of black-tailed godwit breeding in the Fens this year. And that is largely as a result of birds that we've released returning to the Fens and breeding. And we're also undertaking work on our sites like the Neem Washes to help protect nests and protect the wild birds when they return here to nest. And having a population of over 50 pairs of godwit in the Fens is the highest the population has been for 40 years or something. So just goes to show that when you invest there and there are things that we can do to turn around the nature crisis, and these projects can be very successful. Next slide, please, Helen. And outside of our nature reserves, we also support land managers and farmers with nature-friendly farming. So we provide advice, particularly with a focus on turtle doves. So turtle dove has the unfortunate claim of being the fastest declining bird in the UK. But there are really important populations still remaining in Cambridgeshire. So we're working through Operation Turtle Dove to provide supplementary seed and advice about management for turtle doves. And in fact, there was a survey of turtle doves, a nationwide survey this year, which should hopefully help to inform and target our efforts for turtle dove in the future. And as well as that, we also have our own arable farm in Cambridgeshire at Knapwell. And I think Martin Lyons might be on the call. So I feel very, I feel like a fraud talking about Hope Farm when we have the actual person who does all the management here on the call with us. But Hope Farm is a really wonderful place where we demonstrate nature-friendly farming techniques. And it's also used as a site where we can pilot various bits of RSPB research. So, for example, this year we've just started an agroforestry trial, which will be looking at growing trees alongside arable crops. And I would also, for any of you that are interested in wildlife-friendly farming, Hope Farm runs a seminar series during the autumn, which will be going ahead this year, which is well worth looking up and attending. And Georgie Bray, the farm manager, is also well worth following on Twitter if you are on social media. Next slide, please. And I'm hoping that that was about 10 minutes. I'm going to conclude there with our whistle stop tour. Thank you very much. And yeah, hopefully I can see there are some questions in the chat. So looking forward to that.
Lovely. Thank you, Hannah. Marvellous. Really, I always enjoy listening to you so much. Now, I'm going to go through the questions. If there are any to do with the Oxford-Cambridge ARC or about the South Cambridgeshire local plan, I'm going to leave those to the end. So I'm not ignoring you, but I will pick those up at the end because I think it's probably more appropriate that I answer them. So Hannah, the first question was from Bob Ench, and you've just actually answered it, I think. He says, are your wildlife friendly farming measures available publicly? And you've just said there's a seminar series and there's a Twitter feed. Is there anything else you could add to that?
Yeah, so we're part of a partnership called the Farm Wildlife Partnership, and we also support the nature-friendly farming network as well. They've got a brilliant website. Or, you know, everything that we do, we want to promote wildlife-friendly farming measures. So yeah, there are links that we can share, and also Hope Farm is also open for people to come and have a look around. And I know Georgie's always keen to talk to people that have an interest. So absolutely. Brilliant. Thank you, Martin. He's just popped in the chat.
That's excellent, thank you. And there are actually some very sort of social media friendly farmers around. I follow a chap who I've met who I think has the highest farm in Huntingdonshire called Farmer Tom, and he's well worth following. He does a blog every week to school children about life on the farm, and it's great fun as well as really interesting. So there's now a question from Carol. What are your plans for acquiring further sites for development for nature, perhaps in areas that have less access to nature?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. Thank you. So we do tend to focus, we are interested in acquiring more land to restore for nature. Obviously depends on resources and what we can deliver. Particularly at the moment, we do often focus on increasing the size of our existing sites, and that's because we know that bigger sites tend to be able to deliver more for nature. So often you'll get more bang for your buck from extending an existing site than you may do with with creating a smaller site of the same size somewhere else. So at the moment, our focus is on looking at how we can consolidate and extend the sites that we've already got. But yeah, I wouldn't rule it out in the future as potentially taking on more sites, because what those figures from the report show is that we need to try and improve access to nature for everyone, and nature should be for everyone.
Absolutely, and it's upsetting when we hear how many people have no access to nature at all. And I think one of the things the pandemic has shown us all is that nature and access to nature is probably more important than we realise for our health and well-being. I've never been more grateful for living in the countryside with good walks around me. So the next question from Elizabeth May, I think probably relates to the Ouse Fen project. She says, will this help combat flooding due to sea level rises?
So one of the, so it is possible that we could use Ouse Fen to take elements of floodwater, but I think one of the key one of the key drivers for the creation of Ouse Fen was the fact that bitterns were declining within the UK, and we know that bittern, they are found at a lot of coastal sites. So actually creating these inland wetland sites is really important, because as we see sites being lost to coastal squeeze and rising sea level size, that wildlife and those birds are going to need somewhere to go. So as part of our strategy, we do want to try and create more wetland sites to try and mitigate some of these impacts of the changes that we know that are coming.
When I went there, I was lucky enough to see all the birds you've been targeting, apart from the bittern, but I gather you have to be there very early in the morning. So I'm going to have to make
We'll sign you up for a 4 a.m. bittern survey then, Bridget.
Good, I can do that. I can do that. Might need to camp there overnight. Lovely, thank you. Elizabeth May asked about the RSPB's attitude to housing in the Ox but you have quite clearly said the RSPB is not against growth, but provided that that's predicated on improvements to nature, improvements to access to green space, and so on. I think. Do you want to add anything? You made
I will do, and I think I think sometimes we get very hung up on numbers of housing, and actually for us, it's not about numbers. It's about it's about whether those houses are, if there's a big difference between 2,000 houses that are water neutral, that are carbon neutral, that have accessible green space, that deliver biodiversity net gain, than 2,000 houses that don't do that. So I think sometimes we can get hung up about particular numbers of houses, whereas actually it's very context specific. And similarly with the point about environmental limits, we want to see development that respects environmental limits, and if that and I think it's about strategically assessing what those impacts are of the different developments. So I think it's not as simple as a case of just a set number of houses and whether we support or don't support that, because the context is everything.
Thank you. And just to add that we know that one of the consequences of not providing housing that's needed to support the economic environment, the work environment, is that people then live elsewhere and they drive in. And we know that, particularly in our area, transport is the biggest contributor to carbon emissions. So, the ideal is that car ownership, we build houses, it means that car ownership is optional, because actually there's such good public transport, and hopefully low carbon public transport too. So I've just got a couple more questions. There's a nice one from Sue James, who is actually our next speaker. Who says apparently 30% of people are unaware that there's a biodiversity crisis and 17% are aware, but unconcerned. How do we reach that nearly 50% to achieve the change we need?
Oh, wow.
Good question.
That is a brilliant question, isn't it? I mean, I think there's obviously things that RSPB can do, but I think actually it's about we've got to look at what we're doing as a sector, and I think it comes back a little bit to that question about that I had earlier about nature reserves and our own acquisition plans. I think that there's certain stuff that RSPB can do, but actually it's going to take us all working in partnership, and there's nothing, and I think it's brilliant when we see local grassroots organizations developing and doing projects, creating their own nature reserves, people doing it themselves. We RSPB don't have the reach to get everywhere. We have to do more in partnership, and I think obviously education and working with young people is going to be massive to that.
Absolutely. So I've got one more that I'm going to take from Bob. Benedict McDonald's book, Rebirding, recently made me realise the importance of linking reserves to create corridors for bird life. How is the RSPB addressing this? I think that's a nice question for you, because I know that's one of the things you're trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we follow Lawton principles. So we want to see bigger, better and more joined up nature reserves, and that's absolutely critical. So, that impacts our acquisition strategy, where we look to work. And that's one of the reasons why we've got a particular focus on the Fens, because we've got those kind of core networks of sites. There are other sites that are being managed by other NGOs. So there's lots of opportunities to do more there and to join things up. And I think you really notice this with some of these, these big spectacular species like the white-tailed eagles that have been recently released in the Isle of Wight. When they came to visit the Fens in the winter, they were basically doing a tour of all of these, these wetland sites that have been created. So yeah, I think we do want to see more wetlands, and we do want to see bigger, better joined up areas of habitat.
Thank you very, very much indeed, Hannah. And so one of the things I've been talking about a lot in relation to the Oxford-Cambridge Arc, where I lead on the environment, is that as a long distance walker, I want to be able to walk from Oxford to Cambridge on high quality, well managed green space, and there's an opportunity there to link up all the stuff we've got by creating more really, really exciting habitat, which really starts to contribute both to improving biodiversity as well as to access. So we are going, oh, actually, there was just one more that I think I missed, which I just did want to ask. It was about the photograph you showed, which didn't have very much water. I think, was that Falmere? That
was Falmere, yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Sorry, there's a question from Mary Louise, which I just missed out there. Has it been parched like that for long? And, how much of a concern is it? And then we'll move on to next.
Yeah, it's a big concern. At the moment, we haven't had a year where the site has run completely dry, but that's only because the Environment Agency have been pumping water. So, everybody's familiar with the issues affecting the chalk streams, which are obviously in themselves an internationally important habitat. So we've been lucky in a sense at Falmere that we've had that option to pump water, but that's not a long-term sustainable option. So what we're doing is looking at what we can do on site to help mitigate. So can we hold water on site for longer? Can we improve how we move water around the site so that so that the site is better able to cope with kind of water being less available during those key periods? But we also need to obviously address the underlying issues around around sustainable water use and particularly abstraction.
Thank you very much. And so if we could all remotely say thank you to Hannah.
My pleasure. And I will I'll have a look at the questions in the chat, and very happy for people to contact me if they haven't if they want to hear more.
Thank you very much indeed. So moving on, now we've got 10-minute talks now. We're going to take the first 3, so we'll collate the questions together, and then we'll have a break after the first 3. So we're very lucky to have Sue James from Trees and Design Action Group talking about tree planting strategy, which I'm particularly interested in. So over to you, Sue.
Okay, well, thank you very much for inviting the Trees and Design Action Group to be here and to talk about tree strategies. So just a very brief starting point about where are we now. I mean, quite clearly, the UK as a whole is under tree covered. We're in England about 10%. I think Europe is somewhere between 20 and 35%. So we've got a lot of room for improvement. And also in our towns and cities, we've got very uneven tree cover, you know, from the lowest being 3% and the highest being 45%. And indeed, within towns and cities, they're not equally distributed either. And sadly, low levels of tree cover tend to go with areas of social deprivation. So we've got double things. I don't think there's any clear evidence as to how much tree cover you should have in any given situation. And it's something that maybe we can put on our sort of question list. I'm not aware of any research on that. And of course, a great deal depends on geography and climate change aspirations and other issues that you might be trying to solve. So despite the fact that we're now told that the planning reform may be watered down or cancelled, we've still got a lot of government support for trees. And this is actually quite a sort of huge moment, because the Trees and Design Action Group has been working on this since 2007. And I think finally we're getting a breakthrough. So we have the England Trees Action Plan. The England Trees Action Plan has got some very interesting clauses. And by the way, I've sent Peter a kind of set of references, so you needn't worry about taking notes. I mean, apart from the chair, you might want to refer to things. And that's got a clause 1.12, which is says that DEFRA will publish guidance for local authorities to develop their own tree and woodland strategies. We've also, of course, got the National Model Design Code, and clause 3.17 refers to the review of manual for streets and says that this will be reviewed, particularly looking at how to make sure that trees can be properly incorporated into streets, both streets in new development and existing trees, and also working with the National House Builders, whatever it's called, council, because we've got big issues with trees in proximity to houses on shrinkable soils and subsidence. And I'm pleased to say the Trees and Design Action Group has got its sticky fingers in all of those pies, trying to make some common sense about things. But the most interesting clause is 3.16, which says that they must ensure that future planning reforms will lead to more trees being planted and ensure strong protection for existing trees. And this has been reflected in the revised National Planning Policy Framework, which was updated and published in July this year, which introduced clause 131, that trees make an important contribution to the character and quality of urban environments and can help mitigate and adapt to climate change. So planning policies should ensure that new streets are tree-lined, that opportunities are taken to incorporate trees elsewhere in developments, parks, community orchards, and so on. So there's kind of a lot on the side of trees just in those new policy documents. And of course, we've got the local nature recovery strategies, which are out for consultation. And in all of this, we've got to consider biodiversity and environmental net gain. So why tree strategies? What is the value of having a tree strategy? I say tree strategy, not trees as part of a green infrastructure strategy. Why do I say that? Because trees are the longest lived natural element that we have. And so when we're talking about trees and the planting of trees, we're talking transgenerational. We need to be thinking 50, 100 plus years ahead. Whereas elements of green infrastructure, even small areas of green space, but certainly green roofs and green walls, can be very subject to loss if the building happens to be redeveloped, which we're trying to avoid, of course, but, you know, so it's not an ongoing asset. So tree strategy is a tree strategy, standalone tree strategy. You can call it a tree and woodland strategy. You can call it an urban forest management plan, but all these are talking about the same thing. And it's very important that the tree strategy is adopted. The tree strategy really does have to have kind of teeth. It can't be something just be nice to do if we did it that way. And why is it so important to have a tree strategy? Well, take a look at Sheffield. They did not have a robust tree strategy, and we saw the consequences of that. But if you're going to embark on a tree strategy, who benefits? And that's really important. And as far as we can see in the Trees and Design Action Group, everybody benefits. Local councillors benefit, local authority chief executives benefit, planners, developers, highway teams, housing teams, tree and environment teams, the public and private partners and communities. So I won't go through how each of them benefits specifically, although we put that in our tree strategy guidance, but it gives everybody can come together and focus on what trees can do to deliver all these multiple social, environmental and economic benefits that they've been shown to deliver. And local authority departments can share a common vision. So highways, health, housing, planning can all actually have a common vision. And developers actually like certainty, because when they get the famous level playing field they keep talking about. They know what they have to do. That impacts on how much they pay for land and so on and so forth. So it's a kind of, what's that famous phrase, win-win, if people can get a tree strategy right. And to get a tree strategy right, there are some key factors for success. You need collaboration. You must have a shared understanding between all the stakeholders. You need to focus on local needs and aspirations. While there are some things that would be common to any tree strategy, there are local differences, and those have to be recognized. You have to actually also ensure your tree strategy provides a method for delivery. It's not good enough just to have a strategy. It's like all our declarations of climate emergency. They mean nothing unless you actually show how you're going to do something. It must be adopted so it has weight in day-to-day decision making. And so those are kind of the factors for success. The process of developing it is very straightforward. There are basically 4 key questions that you ask yourselves. You say, what have we got? What's our evidence base of what we've got there? Now, you don't have to have it all in place before you can start. You can take things that you probably have got. For example, most local authorities have at least assets, registers of their publicly owned trees. You can then go further and undertake an iTree eco survey to actually determine what you've got in public and private trees, because remember, only about 30% of trees tend to be on public land, 70% on private land. So the inclusion of those private trees and how to encourage and inspire private tree owners to support their trees is sort of very important. The next question is, what do we want? That's when you come together with your common vision. What do we actually want to have? And then you get down to the nitty-gritty a bit more. How do we get it? That's when you need to start working out what your certain things are. What would be your tree canopy or tree planting standards? What kind of targets are you aiming for there? What are your tree replacement standards in the unfortunate event that a tree has to be removed? It's not just, take one out, put one in. It's a very different calculation in order to retain the ecosystem services. What are your risk management policies? What are your design and management principles? I mean, there are a number of questions that you need to ask yourself. And then very importantly, because any tree that's planted, we want to plant for the long term, you do have to monitor how you're going. Are you actually achieving what you've set out to do? And that's a sort of long-term monitoring process. But as I say, it's one step at a time. The other thing about tree strategies is that the principles apply at all levels. They can be national, they can be regional, they can be local. They are very useful for site development, so that the principles of a tree strategy apply everywhere. I won't leave you without some help. Trees and Design Action Group is currently producing Trees Planning and Development, a guide for delivery. We've got section 1 is now available on our website, and that really looks at the financial benefits, which is an important thing if we're going to win the things. And we're also working with DEFRA on this tree strategy guidance, because we want to make sure that there's a common language. As soon as there's any confusion about what we're talking about, everything's in chaos and, oh God, well, we'll all do nothing. So just to conclude, I think one thing I feel very strongly about is that we need a land use framework. We're trying to decide where to plant trees and why and how. We need a land use framework. I know Fiona Reynolds has probably come to talk to this very group about that. Ideally, I'd like a national one for England. Wales and Scotland have them, we don't. But that allows you to make a whole series of layered decisions. And one of the things that's really important on that, and it was touched in, was it Robert Ench's question, about these links. One of a really terrifying talk by Matt Shardlow from Bug Life showed that one of the problems is we get these isolated pockets of green and biodiversity, but if we don't create the green links that allow dispersal, we're actually trapping biodiversity in enclosed pockets, and it actually won't succeed. So if we had our land use framework, we could actually look for Cambridgeshire at how those links that we were discussing that RSPB would like to have could actually be delivered. So I think that's my sort of, is it 10 minutes, hopefully?
Well, you're spot on. So the second, actually.
There
So
we
I'm
are. There we are.
extremely impressed. Thank you very, very much, Sue. Indeed, thank you. So we've got some interesting questions coming, but we'll save them up, and we will go to Michael Sly now from MHS Farms, who's talking about nature-friendly farming, which we've already touched on. So, so welcome, Michael, and over to you now.
Good morning, and Helen, I presume you'll be sharing the presentation, please. Here we go. Okay. Oh, well, good morning, Cambridgeshire, and from a rather damp welcome rain here in the land of the big sky in the north of the county that is the Fens. Family farming business on the old ducal and former monastic estate here at Thorney, and the family have been involved in and around the Fens for over the last 350 years. So I do feel rooted to that soil. The farm borders the Neem Washes that have been mentioned earlier, and also the tidal river Neem, which the tidal limit is only 3 miles from Peterborough at the Dog and the Doublet, which, as some of you may be aware, is a wonderful habitat and home to cranes, godwits, and certainly this winter we had an enormous amount of hooper swans, and at one point my lad calculated that on one harvested sugar beet field we must have had 12% of the UK's migratory population that's estimated to be here. But before I get into the presentation, I would just like to remind everybody that the Fens are a unique and special place. They obviously are in Cambridgeshire, Lincolnshire, Norfolk, and a part of Suffolk. So we need to all think about it as a wider geographic area. And our principal business is to produce food, but also to produce food for nature. So within the Fens, there is room to feed the nation and feed its nature. And I think we have a unique opportunity within this county to be able to do both, and we have some wonderful assets and such. Next slide, please. So the farms span across 3 businesses, over 5,000 acres, and there's the team at one of the harvests. Just for some context, we sit just east of Peterborough at Thorney, so we sort of border the North Cambs and South Lincolnshire. But the Fens, about 670,000 acres of the Fens, or roughly 70% of the Fens from the Fens delivering for Britain food report from the NFU, said that we're in environmental stewardship with over 270 miles of hedgerows and 1,780 miles of ditches providing habitat. What we're talking about this morning is very important environmental goods and what we can all collectively do. But we must also bear in mind that in all the policy work and everything that we do, we don't export our environmental conscience from these shores to other places on the planet that are probably more water stressed than we are and have other environmental issues. And we mustn't virtue signal that we feel good about whatever we do, but we've exported our problems somewhere else on the planet. Next slide, please. This is a short video just to give you an idea of the farming numbers. Okay, Helen, I think that's, if you can move on, please. And that is just a slide, if you didn't quite catch everything, of what we've got on the display for when we have visitors. Obviously, some of those are generic photos. I don't have woodland like that on the farm, but it just gives you an impression of, as an easy snapshot, a visual aid of what we produce. It's slightly more now because we've acquired some more land, but hopefully that gives you a view of us helping to feed you, as it were, and providing some wonderful bits for nature and habitat that I'm going to come on to within the farm. Next slide, please. So we've been in forms of environmental stewardship now quite some time, originally starting with the original countryside stewardship scheme, then moving into environmental stewardship and higher level stewardship, which we're still currently in, and Natural England by agreement are rolling these over on an annual basis until we work with them to decide whether we move into the new countryside stewardship and then move into the new elm scheme once that is up and running. So that is work in process. As you saw, we've got over 400 skylark plots, 6 metre buffer strips around all of our water courses to create field margins, pollen and nectar mixes, winter bird mixes, and I mentioned the sugar beet earlier, and then also we do grow some maize for a dairy at Guy Herne, and it's incredible how the cranes do love to come and feed on those, some of that leftover harvest in the winter. Since we've been doing this, we have seen a marked improvement, we feel, in species on the farm. So next slide, Helen, please. So as part of this, and what's unique about the Fens, the Fens isn't particularly about trees and hedges, but it is about channels and ditches. And working with the guys at the RSPB a number of years ago, who aren't there now, we decided to do some ditch work that runs into the IDB system. And you can see there where it looks like a pond. That is in a straight channel, but we've scalloped either side of the ditch to make it into a wider water body to create more habitat. But also from the drainage board, it allows the water to go up and down within the channel, and it creates quite a great habitat. And we've actually rolled that out. So if we're having any ditch work done on any of the farms which are near to a good water table that rises, and falls through the year, we can roll out more of these to connect up other bits of habitat that we've got. And I think if I can leave you with one impression today, the Fens, there's about 4,000 miles of IDB ditches, and probably the ditch network with the private, there's probably 50, 60,000 miles of ditch network across the whole of the Fens, which is grass, great habitat corridor. I know some of it has to be more intensively managed to move the water for the flood protection, but it is a great resource, a great asset, and I would like you to go away with thinking that those are Cambridgeshire's inverted hedges, and they can provide just as much wildlife benefit and habitat as a hedgerow in other parts of the county. Next slide, please. Also, you saw that we grew mustard, and as part of the mustard growers, which is a cooperative, there's 18 of us, we did some wonderful work which was sponsored by Unilever, who owned Coleman's, through their North Sustainability Partnership, and Hutchinson's agrochemical company, who are based at Wisbech in the north of the county. And back in 2015, all of the mustard growers had a report done with a French company in Vivo, which mapped all of our farms, all the crops we grew, what trees, what other habitats we had, to basically provide the growers with the knowledge base of how much food supply they could create for pollinators. And this is just a snapshot of this report. We wanted to sort of really, by the time it came out, there'd been changes in Unilever and lost some of the momentum. But we do ask the growers every year what improvement they've done, and on our own farm, we've planted somewhere in the region of 50 to 60,000 crocus and snowdrop bulbs to try and create some feed source earlier on in the season. And then we need to work to try and extend, you know, into October, November. But obviously hawthorn, blackthorn, dogwood, hazel, guelder rose, mentioned the bulbs. And then this year we have also, with Barcham at Ely, planted a number of black poplar, trying some elm and some lime, which should all be good. Next slide. This all then feeds into our Open Farmer Vintage Weekend event. And this is what we call our farm safari. I know it might sound a little bit cheesy to you all, but it's just a tractor and trailer ride, bringing the local community out, whether it's from Peterborough or various parts of the county. And this is what they might see on the ride around one field. And the community interaction and sense of well-being, as has been mentioned earlier, is profound. We've not been able to do it for 2 years for COVID. We do have a footpath through the farm, which we've mown weekly through COVID, and just seeing the people getting out there for the health and well-being has been tremendous. So we do try and do the community action, which is through this sort of event once a year. And then we'll move on, please. Conscious of time.
1 minute, Michael.
Yeah, okay, nearly there.
Jolly
Nearly
good.
there. I think we were the first, but the RSPB's farm and bird friendly zone, there were 17 farmers of it. Obviously, with the cutbacks there, the momentum of that has waned, but some of us are still carrying on it. Next slide. And then just the common cranes are absolutely wonderful. Neem washes, sometimes in the winter, we'll see 40 to 50 of them. At the moment, there's 2 pairs that come and feed on the farm. They actually walk over the bridge and down in the field. And quickly, just next slide, because you need to see this. This is aspirational. This is not what we're doing. This is aspirational, because I've got to find out, taking this land out of production, how I'm going to derive an income from it for the future. But you can see with the LiDAR map, this is a plan. I like to call it our cranery. I know that isn't a word, but there's a potential that when Charlie's Wash is flooded, there is some habitat for them to come and breed in the spring. That's the aspiration. If you whiz through the other slides, then there was just, that's the birds that we've had surveyed on the farm, and that's the end. Thank you all very much for your time.
Thank you, Michael. That was great. I've never seen a common crane in the wild, so I think I'm going to come and visit you. And I love the idea of inverted hedges. That's fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. So our next speaker is Carly Leonard of PECT, and better start by telling us what PECT means. Carly, over to you.
Thanks, Bridget. I'm really pleased to be here. So thanks again for the invite, Peter. And some fantastic talks so far. Really, really excited by what I've heard. Particularly excited about coming on the farm safari. So I will be coming down to do that. It sounds brilliant. So PECT is Peterborough Environment City Trust. PECT is an environmental charity. We've been working on community and sustainability initiatives for around 30 years now. So I've been with PECT for around 8 years, so I'm the chief executive there. I'm also a trustee of Natural Cambridgeshire, and I chair the communities group at the moment. And so, yeah, lots of involvement with the LNP over many years as well. So what I wanted to talk about today is about how communities can get involved. And there's been some discussion around that already in the talks that we've already had. And these issues are so interlinked. So I wanted to just talk a bit about community involvement, what support is available already, some of the things that are happening, and then where the future plans are, particularly for Natural Cambridgeshire, more than PECT. Something that has kind of just sparked my thoughts though is we at PECT, we deliver a project called Forest for Peterborough, which is about planting a tree for every resident in Peterborough. We started that in 2010, and that's, the population keeps going up, so we're planting more and more trees, but by 2030 we aim to have planted 230,000 trees. So we've planted about 120,000 already. So that's a really interesting project. And I think some of the conversations that have happened about native trees, that kind of thing. So obviously it's about the right tree in the right place, and also thinking about future adaptability to climate change. So where we can use native trees, that's what we try to do, but we're also trying to have that future thought about which trees will be sustainable in the long term as well. So yeah, really interesting to hear about some of the work that Sue was talking about the tree strategies. So anyway, back to community engagement. So community engagement obviously has a really important role, particularly around delivering nature-based solutions. And because the problems that we face are complex and so interlinked around climate change adaptation, mitigation, air quality, biodiversity and habitat loss, we need solutions across the board. So we need strategic landscape scale solutions, we need local solutions, and we need everything in between. But locally delivered, locally led work can really have that locally attuned intervention. And I think that's so important, because as well as the benefits to the environment and sustainability, you have real benefits around empowering communities, improving social cohesion, health and well-being, as we've kind of already talked about, and so many other benefits to communities in their local areas. But what we face is there are gaps, and not every community is set up to deliver this kind of activity. Sometimes they're not empowered, sometimes they don't have the resources or the capacity. So one of the things we wanted to do at Natural Cambridgeshire is to think about what support can we put in place, and how can communities be supported to deliver the doubling nature ambition alongside those other interventions that we've already mentioned. So the three areas that I wanted to just cover are the local nature recovery toolkit, the Cllr countryside and some of the activity that's happening there, and then a piece of work we're doing at Natural Cambridgeshire with the Future Parks initiative as well. So first of all, the local nature recovery toolkit is a toolkit that was launched by Natural Cambridgeshire in 2020, and it's to support communities in their role in doubling nature. It's about improving wildlife habitats, helping communities be involved and understand what's around them, improving health and well-being, creating resilience to climate change for the countryside and for communities as well. It's not prescriptive, it's more of a guide. It gives people a place to start, which is often the barrier that we find, and it's to help them put in place a medium-term plan, so a 10-year plan for their area about what they can do. So the aspects of it are making a simple plan of wildlife habitats, deciding what the objectives are, developing a nature recovery map, putting a timeline in place, and then crucially having a plan for how to monitor and maintain that activity over the longer term. And in each of those areas, there's guidance and support. So communities aren't on their own. They've got places to go. They've got links to where other people might be able to help them. Within the guide, there is more detailed information about the certain types of wildlife habitat that could be focused on. So that might be gardens, allotments, verges, churchyards, orchards, farmland. So a whole range of different options and different guidance for each of those elements. The next area I wanted to just talk about is the Cllr countryside area. So that's the area north of Peterborough, which many of you will be familiar with. That was already a very active area in terms of community involvement, a really proactive community, lots of partner engagement as well happening there. So PECT and Natural Cambridgeshire and others are working on a partnership project through the Green Recovery Challenge Fund, and that's administered by the National Heritage Lottery Fund. And that partnership project is about habitat creation to support doubling nature again. It's about responding to the climate change and biodiversity emergencies, supporting local communities to take proactive action. It's about access as well, responsible access to the countryside, and about working with landowners. And it's also about putting in a long-term plan for how that area will be managed into the future. So the different aspects of that project are about putting in place local nature recovery plans, about community knowledge exchange. So a really nice focus of this project is about urban and rural community knowledge exchange, things like seed swaps. There's a lot of focus around nature networks, so landowner engagement, farm walks, the kinds of things we've heard Michael talking about as well. Really important to build that understanding from both sides. And then lots about access and awareness. So a real focus on trails and building Cllr and actually the heritage of Cllr into the piece of work, so that people have more of an understanding of how he described nature and being part of that as a whole. So that project runs from September, so just starting now, to March 2023. So that's a really exciting project. Next, I just want to move on to the Future Parks. So Future Parks is a national project, which many of you will be aware of. That's about innovative ways to secure and enhance the future of public parks and green spaces. And with future parks, we're doing a piece of work to understand what the barriers are that communities face and giving out some funding and advice to help those communities to overcome those barriers. So throughout August, we opened up a funding pot that communities could bid into, and we received 22 applications for that funding. 14 of those were from rural areas and 8 of them were from urban areas. And we had applications from people wanting to make improvements to churchyards, ponds, verges, school grounds. There were urban estates in there as well. So a really, really interesting mix of applications that came through. We had the most in Huntingdon District Council area and South Cambs, and we had the fewest in Fenland and East Cambs. But there was a whole range of activities there, and they were all against the criteria that we've talked about already. So improving wildlife habitats, instilling local pride in the area, helping build more resilient communities to climate change, and also putting nature at the heart of our response to climate change and biodiversity emergencies. So there's a little bit of a, try to keep it as quick as I can, a tour of some of the things that are happening already and some of the support that's available. But the last thing that I wanted to mention is, in terms of the future, one of the things that we face at PECT, and I think we face in this sector, is that some of the support and advice that's available is quite disparate. So you can have a project, you can have an activity, but they're not all linked together. And also the communities that come forward, particularly for the FPA, the Future Parks work, were probably those kind of shovel-ready projects where the communities were already really strong, they already had a plan. Some of them have got match funding in place. So that's not the case with all of them. But what we don't want is only for communities that are already really strong, in a really strong position, to be able to get more funding and more support. And I think it comes back to that inequities that we talked about earlier. So what we'd like to do is build an offer that goes across the whole of the county, that communities can get support from wherever they are and whatever stage they're at. So that's about a whole county-wide offer which supports with data and analysis, community knowledge sharing, advice, guidance and funding that can then bring together all of the activities that are happening across the whole of the county. So together with Helen and Richard, we've been working on that, and we've approached 3 of the district councils across the area and are having conversations with them. We're also looking to support for support from other partners as well. So that's kind of what we're trying to build to, so that there's a consistent place that people can come to for that kind of support and guidance, and we can all push on together. So in the meantime, if you know of any communities that would like to get involved, whichever stage they're at, if they don't know where to start or if they're already quite advanced, I would point them towards the local nature recovery toolkit. I'll make sure that I share the link with that so that can come out after the meeting. Okay, I think that's probably 10 minutes, so I'll leave it there. Thank you.
That's lovely. Yes, a few seconds short, so well done. Okay, so we'll thank you very much, Carly. Again, I've heard Carly recently as well, and I never tire of listening to her. So we'll go through some of these questions. Now, some of them are quite political questions, so I will save those for me at the end, because I don't think it's very fair to ask some of our speakers so far to deal with stuff that's about councils and about the political climate. But if I start off with Sue, and there's a few questions about trees and hedges and about what you plant. So I think as a non-expert, I just assume that indigenous trees are the best, but actually, is that the case? Does it, do we have to restrict ourselves just to indigenous species, or are there other species that actually can deliver the same sort of benefits? Why stick to the indigenous? Really?
So please don't stick just to the indigenous species. This is an ongoing discussion. When you think about an urban environment, don't think of a temperate UK climate, start thinking arid desert. In some of these particularly inner city areas, we're really asking trees to deal with the most extraordinarily difficult situations. And a lot of our native trees are not suitable for those situations and are not happy in them. The other thing is that climate change is now starting to play a role in the long-term success of trees and some of our native trees. I can't actually find the report, I'm sure Peter will know, but there was a recent report that actually showed the potential threats to some of our most beloved species like oak and so on from the impacts of climate change. And the Forestry Commission no longer recommend planting birch trees in southern England because they're actually trees of northern forests. So, you know, we do have our tree species selection guide, which tries to pick up all these issues to help make those decisions. But there's this sort of phrase, right place, right tree. I actually want to completely reverse it and say, please, can you talk about the right place? And having established the location, why you're planting a tree, what trees, what you want them to do, then you can start looking at which trees would be most appropriate for that location for a multitude of reasons, you know, their growth patterns, their canopy spread, and their ability to withstand the conditions, the place that you're putting them into.
That's really interesting. I have, my husband has a thing about sycamores and hates sycamores.
Oh, but they're wonderful for all sorts of reasons. I'm looking at a glorious one out of my window.
Well, I think they look lovely, but I think it's just because, you know, they're not native trees. But I shall now tell him that I've heard from the expert that sycamores are wonderful. So a question for you, Michael, I think, from Wendy about in relation to farming and solar farms, and obviously in South Cambridgeshire. In recent years, I mean, it's slowed down now since the removal of the government's subsidies, but we've seen huge amounts of land given over to solar farms. You know, and I know that, in fact, I was at an event with Cllr just the other day where we heard some really exciting research about dealing with runoff from solar farms, which can cause flooding, but actually by planting very deep-rooted species under them, actually you deal with the potential flooding, and you also enhance biodiversity as well. So I just, you know, what was your views on solar farms in relation to the sort of farming that you are a proponent of?
Well, these are obviously totally personal views of my own, and we do have solar panels on our roofs. I don't have any solar panels on the ground, but where I have observed, majority of on-farm ones on that larger field scale would normally be into grass with habitat. Some of them might be grazed with sheep, but there is normally some biodiversity gain from the ones that I know of. But I think to the point, I think that technology, I think putting them on new homes, commercial buildings will still be viable for the use within that commercial or domestic setting. But certainly in this northern part of the county, the grid is absolutely maxed out. We sort of sit under UK Power Networks in Cambridgeshire, just north of the border. It's Western Power, and basically the people you talk to, the grid cannot take any more renewable energy projects to actually balance the grid out. And I think if you look at it, all the growth will be in offshore wind and the new technologies there, from what I understand. But solar will still have a place, but I think on a much smaller level for domestic and commercial use, and probably in-home battery storage for cars, etc. So, well, that is my own view. Others might have another view, but I'm not sure about the wholesale sort of carpeting of the landscape in solar panels. And for those of you aware, they're not trying to be political, but there was an issue with the Peterborough City Farms estate where they wanted to cover all those in solar panels a number of years ago. But I think one of the lessons from that was if they'd actually worked together with their tenants and things, they could have provided and done something. So as long as you work with people, you can achieve what you want to do. But if you start to do things that doesn't include people, then don't be surprised if there's a counter to reaction. But there again, it was the grid issue. So I hope that's sort of that, but that is my own personal view.
Wise words. And actually, while I've got you, I imagine most people on this call today are aware of the proposal for the Fen Biosphere project.
Yes.
What are your sort of personal views on that? Because it's I mean, to me it just sounds fantastic, but it is a political hot potato in some quarters.
Well, we've been involved with it. I'm now wearing, because I'm chair of the North Level Internal Drainage Board. We've had the guys from Fens Biosphere come to present at the board a couple of times, and from the IDB point of view, we've been supportive of that. And I think we must all remember we all live and share the Fens, and it is a wonderful place, and it can be. But we must remember, I'll keep this polite, but the Fens happen to be the backside of everybody else's county, whether it's Cambridgeshire, Lincolnshire, Norfolk or Suffolk. So it always gets sort of overlooked, whereas if it was looked more in a strategic whole, I think we could achieve far more. And as I said in my presentation, I do believe there's room for us to feed the nation and feed the nature, from that environment. Because just one parting gift with that, Bridget, the Fens occupy 3% of England's farmed area, but produce over 7% of its food. So from a productivity point of view, it's a very valuable resource in trying to keep the shelves filled.
Absolutely. And actually, I can assure you that in the combined authority board meetings I spend a lot of time on, we probably spend more time talking about the Fens and Fenland than anywhere else. So we're certainly not overlooking it because we're well aware.
Oh no, I wasn't reading it like that. But
I'm teasing you.
But there are some problems. The Wiz Beach Garden Town. There's some specific problems in some of the communities across.
Oh, I know. But
the whole of the Fens.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, we're very, very interested in the concept of re-wetting the peat. So Carly, a nice question from Nick Sanford, who's picked up on the planting a tree for every resident in Peterborough and saying, could that be extended throughout Cambridgeshire? My gut reaction would be, yes, why not? But I know it's not that simple because, even in my own village, I know we planted some oak trees in not the right place and they died. And, that's a bit of a shame. So how do you think it could work on as a county-wide scheme?
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. And I think it would be complex, and I think it would take a lot of planning, and it kind of links back to some of the issues that were talked about earlier about not just having pockets of activity or habitat. It needs to be joined together. So I think if it happened, it would need to be joined together in a strategic way, but also in terms of management and maintenance. Joining bigger areas of tree planting is better. Doing some infilling here and there is obviously, that's fine. And I think hedgerows, I think Wendy mentioned a question earlier about hedgerows. We do lots of hedgerow planting as part of our forest project because that's very important too. But it's doing things in places that make it possible to maintain and manage for the long term. The way we work with forest is that we put the trees in place, but then the landowners then take them forward. So we have to do quite a lot of work about landowner engagement, making sure that they understand the maintenance and the future and looking after those trees in the future. But one really positive thing we do is working with communities and corporates as well, getting people out to do the planting. So that obviously serves lots of purposes. People get out, people get benefits from that from a health and wellbeing perspective, but they get to understand nature, they feel part of it. There's that pride, there's that kind of wanting to look after it for the future as well. So we would really welcome sort of having discussions about how we could expand across Cambridgeshire for that. I think it's an important, so many of the things that we do can feel a bit intangible, but a tree for every person is something that people can get their heads around as well. So yeah, I think it's a good point. Be happy to discuss it.
Thank you. Right. And actually, it's things that grab people's attention, as you say. So last year with South Cambridgeshire, we called it 3 free trees, which turned out to be the worst tongue twister going. And so we gave 3 free trees to every single village, and either the parish council or a community group applied. So as part of our doubling nature strategy this year, it's 6 free trees, which is slightly easier to say, and 12 free trees next year will be better still. Not because we're going to dramatically improve the tree cover, but actually it's just about making people think about trees and about where they can go. And I know there's been some examples where people got their 3 trees and then actually then planted 30. Sue, you'd like to come in on this one?
Yeah, I was just going to say quite quickly that there's a thing with buildings, we talk about the performance gap, and you've probably all heard about the performance gap. We don't deliver what we think we should. And so the Trees and Design Action Group, we're just putting a project together, which we hope DEFRA might pick up, on how to overcome the performance gap, i.e. the planting and the dying cycle that happens too often, but also with some guidance for non-specialists, because a lot of community groups get very keen to do things. And although it's slightly outside our area of expertise, because we kind of give evidence, information for professionals, it's also really important because there can be enthusiasm, but limited knowledge, and then all that effort doesn't actually go into getting the solutions that people want. The other thing I was just going to touch on is that Forest Research is completing a short research project on how communities respond to trees, because it's not absolutely clear. I mean, for everybody who absolutely loves trees or all these things, you have people, my 50% that I raised in that first question, who either don't know or don't really care about any of it too much. And I was talking to a housing developer the other day, and they're trying to do their very best to introduce green infrastructure, but they said we can only concentrate on our public areas, because if we put things like trees in people's gardens, they will just take them down. So we've got a kind of big information gap, because the trees in those gardens might actually provide the shade so that their children can then play, but they haven't actually made those connections. And just very quickly, can I just ask you, sorry, while I've got the floor, so many questions have related to enforcement, and it is just the hugest issue. Are you going to sort of pick that one up, because it strikes me as being a financial one?
Yeah, I'll pick that up at the end. So look, we're getting, you're all marvellous, so we're getting loads of questions. So I am going to move us on, but if any of the speakers we've had so far would like to address in the chat any of the questions that we haven't actually managed to air publicly. And I see some people are very helpfully putting in information and offers of help and contact details and so on. So please do, everybody, keep a look at the chat, because there's lots of really good stuff there. So moving on now, we have Gavin Shelton, the co-farm movement, about which I don't know anything, so I'm very interested in this. So Gavin, 10 minutes starting now.
Thanks very much, Bridget. I'm going to be sharing my own slides this morning, so I'll just pop those up and get them started. So thanks very much for inviting me. Can you see those, Bridget? If you can nod, that'd be great. Thank you. So I wear a few different hats just by way of background, one of which is I'm the founder of a new charitable startup called Co-Farm. I'm also on the partnership board for Cambridge Sustainable Food, which is part of a national sustainable food places programme. And I have the honour to have been invited to co-chair the Food Farming and Countryside Commission's Cambridgeshire inquiry alongside Dame Fiona Reynolds, which some of you will have been to the initial kick-off meeting about a land use framework last Friday. So, but here in my capacity as founder of Co-Farm this morning. So just to tell you a bit about what we're doing. We have set up a not-for-profit group, so a charitable foundation and two trading subsidiaries, wholly owned trading subsidiaries, to scale up a practice which we call co-farming. The sort of longhand version of that is community-based agroecological farming, so co-farming for short. Basically, it has four main outcomes that we're trying to bring about through this model. The first of which there, and of course particularly pertinent to Natural Cambridgeshire, is thriving ecosystems. So building natural capital, building effective ecosystem services and biodiversity, linked of course very closely to climate change adaptation and mitigation as well. The second major area is more cohesive communities, and I know we've touched on this. A few of the speakers have touched on this morning. We think that food and farming can be one of the primary drivers, once again, of creating more cohesive communities and healthier populations as well. That's the other thing we're trying to achieve, both through the practice of getting people involved in food production, but also through eating food, which is being produced in a way that supports health and well-being. And finally, the last one there is just about kind of using food and farming as a way to create a more inclusive local economy as well, with less extraction of value and more capture of that value at the community level. And this is where we are piloting our model. So we've got a 7-acre site, which we don't own. We've got a farm business tenancy on a 7-acre field, which is just next to Coldham's Common. You see the land around us there, which is in a ward in Cambridge called Abbey Ward. For those of you that know Cambridge well, you may know that Abbey is Cambridge's most deprived ward and is in the sort of lowest 20th percentile in the country in terms of the indices of deprivation. And somebody touched earlier on inequalities, but there is a 10-year life expectancy gap between Abbey Ward and Newnham, which is about 1.5 miles away in the same city. And I know that's kind of echoed across other parts of the county as well. So a good place to have a pilot project for a project which is about building food justice, among other things. Just to say, we had about 300 people. Agroecology, one of the kind of core principles of it is about co-creation and sharing of knowledge. And so we think that co-creating designs for community farms is a really important part of the process. So throughout 2019, we worked with more than 300 members of the local community to ask, how do you want to feel when you're at your farm? And, in order to help you feel that way, what do we need to provide? And so that process brought about this plan that you can see on the right-hand side there. You'll see at the centre there is a sort of 2-acre market garden block. That's for sort of being really productive in terms of food production. You'll see other aspects, including an orchard there, a heritage orchard, ponds for capturing water and increasing biodiversity, a community barn structure and things. So this is very much a co-created design with and for the local community. Another artist's impression of aspects of the design which we haven't yet implemented, but which are in process. And there you see a year on, actually, this is what the community have started to actually kind of implement for themselves. Now, obviously, horticulture and farming is kind of pretty technical discipline and is a knowledge-based practice. So all of this on the ground action is being led by 2 extremely knowledgeable and professional horticulturists here, Don Walsh on the left-hand side there and Pete Rapson on the right. Pete was Jamie Oliver's head gardener for about 8 years, growing food for the foundation and worked at Botanic Gardens. Dom on the left there is a specialist in companion planting and working with nature, and is an ecologist by background and training as well. But working alongside Pete and Dom, we've had so far about 300 local volunteers, some of whom were involved in the co-design process as well for the farm, and some of whom have come to us since we've been operating. We only started to actually put any crops in the ground in June of last year, after we had put in place our rabbit-proof fencing that you saw on that block, that market garden block. But it's attracted a really diverse group of people to the farm. It's a very happy place to be, I'm happy to report. So we have people kind of coming together, forming really strong friendships, getting to know people in the community that they otherwise might not have met, collaborating together, and managing their own health and well-being by being not only close to nature, but by actually engaging with other people, which, as we know very well from recent experience, has been more important than ever during a time when people have been experiencing social isolation anyway, but never more so than during the pandemic. So as I said, it's a very cohesive place to be. We're actually just in the process of, in about October of this year, end of October, University of Essex will be reporting back on some work that has been funded by ESRC, Economic and Social Research Council, looking at, does co-farming deliver more cohesive communities? We hope the answer will be yes, but their findings will be coming out towards the end of October. We have had some events like a family day for bringing the local community, children and young people from the local community, to find out about how we work with nature to grow food. And you can see some of our mini co-farmers in the top left there, getting stuck in digging some potatoes into the soil. But really, the whole idea behind co-farming is to try and do things in a very holistic way. We think that community-based farming can be a really powerful tool for delivering all of those outcomes that I explained at the beginning of the presentation. And just to say a couple of people on this slide here. So Shemaine up in the top left there, and Alex in the blue shirt down here and bottom left. they both now, after being involved with Co-Farm, have gone professionally into careers in horticulture. So Shemaine's gone to set up her own farm in Buckinghamshire because a piece of ideal land became available, and Alex there has also moved into horticulture professionally, and so too has James, who was featured earlier on in the presentation, who now has a gardening career. So just to say a bit more about how we kind of work with nature as well, we've used combinations of cover crops, and we use lots and lots of flowers on the farm to attract beneficial predatory insects, so that we don't need to use any nasty chemical inputs on the holding. And as well as having the benefit of supporting more sustainable food systems at the local level, it also attracts an enormous amount of wildlife, and helps people to feel like they're in a place which is lovely to be. So it really helps with managing people's health and well-being, providing spaces for people to be. Lots of our volunteers had no green space at all that they could access, and particularly during lockdowns, that was a lifeline for many people. You'll see the chap on the bottom right down there is a fox called Biscuit, who's something of a local celebrity now in the Co-Farm community. He was looking quite mangy when we first met him, and we've been sort of feeding him up and giving him some treatment for his mange as well. And now he's got a young family of 2 cubs and a mate, and they take care of the pigeons for us in our market garden. So a good example of working in harmony with nature. This is just a kind of image of some of the food that's come off the farm. We've produced so far nearly 10 tonnes of organically grown produce. So it's very productive already after just over a year of operation. And we've donated all of that food, valued at over £40,000, to 9 community food hubs across Cambridge City, in collaboration with Cambridge City Council and our partners at Cambridge Sustainable Food. The next phase now is to start looking at kind of scaling up the model, which is why I think Helen invited me to use the term Co-Farm movement for this presentation. And that's really looking at how we scale up the model to create a distributed estate, all gathering the same sort of data on health and well-being, on natural capital uplift, and we're looking to identify a further 6 pilot sites across Cambridgeshire, 1 in each of the Natural Cambridgeshire priority landscapes. So we're very much looking forward to working with Natural Cambridgeshire, and hopefully some of you on this call as well, to look at where else we might bring this model to across the county. So thank you very much for listening, and happy to take any questions later, of course.
Thank you, Gavin. That's inspiring. It's fantastic. So thank you very much indeed. I'm sure there's lots of questions popping up already. Next, we're going over to Helen Dye, talking about creating a central fund. So this is something I spend a lot of time talking about. So looking forward to this one. Over to you, Helen.
Thank you, and thank you everybody. Such amazing things that are happening in Cambridgeshire, and we've just got to do a lot more of it and accelerate it, I think, and which takes me on to these things cost money. So as we all know, so creating a central, just to say I'm a coordinator for Natural Cambridgeshire. I was in post earlier this year when Natural Cambridgeshire became a charitable incorporated organisation, and so I work with Richard Assel, who's the chair, and all of the partners of Natural Cambridgeshire to try to develop and implement the doubling nature vision. And I wonder now if we know we've got to double nature, and now we're sort of valuing nature, and how do we embed that language of natural capital and ecosystem services in the new world. And I think we're making a good start on that, but we've got a lot more to do. So I'm just going to talk briefly about the plans that the Natural Cambridgeshire Board and Trustees have to establish a central fund to underpin nature's recovery across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. So the intention is to set up a doubling nature investment fund. Since the launch of the doubling nature vision in 2019, it's clear that coordinated and targeted investment is required to begin to restore our nature depleted county, and business as usual is just simply not an option. The climate and biodiversity crisis requires us to do more and more quickly. It ain't gonna wait around for us, you know, but we've got the ingredients, we've got the people, we've got the projects as we've seen today. We just got to get on and do it, inspire communities and inspire investment as well, and look at a way at targeting that investment and showing that there's value in businesses, philanthropists, public money going into natural capital project. So as many of you will know, Natural Cambridgeshire has 6 priority landscapes, and progress is being made within those landscapes to develop work programmes and to attract investment. There have been some recent successes to date that have included securing substantial lottery funds. The Great Fen, which forms part of the connected Fens landscape, has secured 7 million, I believe, there, or is in the process of securing 7 million to progress that work. And again, it's not just about the biodiversity aspects, it's about access, it's about health and well-being. And I know that within the Great Fen bid, there's a real focus there on adolescent mental health. We have the Neem Valley, and Andrew Mcdermott will talk after me about the work that they've done there to secure funding for particular access for the Neem Park Trust. There's some good sort of money around, but we need to do a lot more. Cllr countryside work with communities in the parishes around Helpston, and Carly's spoken about that, and there's a real energy there. And often when I'm talking to people, you hear about how that energy is infectious, and supporting the communities there to support each other and to generate that critical mass of interest coming from the bottom up. So it's really interesting. We're lucky to have that, and Carly developing that work there through the lottery funds that have recently been secured. We have the Cambridge Nature Network, again a great piece of work there, which the Wildlife Trust and Cambridge Past, Present and Future have been leading on, and in many ways there's a blueprint there for some of the other local areas to follow. And they've done a lot of work around the mapping, the opportunity mapping, and have a system in place that has been well supported and well thought through. Do have a look at the Cambridge Nature Network report if you haven't already. It's a very good piece of work, and I think we can learn a lot from that. And as I say, James Littlewood and of the Cambridge Past, Present and Future, and Martin Baker from the Wildlife Trust, very key in doing that piece of work. We're lucky to have them both here in our county. We have the West Cambridgeshire Hundreds, which is a project being led mostly by farmers and landowners, particularly looking in the South Cambridgeshire area around the ancient woodland and the pockets, and how that joins up, how we can augment that woodland. But some really good work beginning to happen there. Again, strong leadership from farmers and landowners in that group. And we have the Great Ooze Valley, including the Ouse Washes, which again is getting underway, and there's all to play for there. It's very exciting. I would say that I live in St Ives, but I think it's an amazing opportunity that we can really begin to pull that partnership together to secure its future. And alongside the landscapes that we have, we are already actively promoting community-led nature recovery programs, which Carly has talked about earlier. And the grants pilots program with the Future Parks initiative, again, shows that there is an interest and an appetite from communities, including parish and town councils, community groups and individuals who want to take a proactive role in nature recovery where they live. And that important thing there around placemaking, how important that is around placemaking, and communities are so creative, but we've got to ensure that that is infectious, and that we can work work with and support the communities who perhaps need a little bit more extra help there. So all of this is going to cost a lot of money if we are to, you know, a lottery grant is fine, but what happens when that runs out? We know that natural capital, the stocks, if, you know, Partha Dasgupta, Professor Dasgupta, the economics and biodiversity, you know, natural capital stocks are going to go up. So we need to invest, and we need to make sure that our sort of investment portfolio for our natural capital projects is clearly laid out and clearly managed, and there's a system and a framework in place. We've talked here about a land use framework, but we now need the mechanism to support the funding to target that. So Natural Cambridgeshire, our partners are already actively acting now to help nature recover, and many people around this here at this meeting will be doing that, but we need to do a lot more, and our ambitions will take many, many years to deliver. There is too much at stake. We can't wait around. So, and we talked about the importance of water and water resource management to the local area and how important our fen and peat is. Our county is unique, but nature and equity, I think, are some of the key themes that are coming through. Although it's often argued that water is absolutely key and fundamental, I always think water and biodiversity are two sides of the same coin and can't be divided. And actually nature is the way in, the sort of the people, if you like, prioritize nature. If what's important around climate change, it's nature, it's how much we value nature. They don't yet perhaps understand the water piece anyway. So to set up a fund, what does a fund look like? All of these things are obviously hugely important. The governance, architecture and management of a fund is critical, and so it's critical to ensure any sort of funding mechanism is easy for investors to invest in, and that could be businesses, philanthropy, public sector, restricted and unrestricted. There needs to be a system and architecture in place that supports all of those and is able to service those people who want to give funding and steward that money effectively. It has to be independent, transparent and accountable. And discussions obviously need to happen to look at what that governance structure would look like. Funds can be targeted where they are most needed, so that around opportunity mapping, about understanding where our natural capital is, where those rich habitats are, where we need to, and balance that alongside the growth agenda as well. It's a balance that we're beginning to find a way through, and also it needs to be a place where donors, investors and projects have access to an independent expert panel of advisors, and I think that's one of the things we see is absolutely critical in the management of a fund, and also the servicing of funding that investors may seek to give, that there is an independent sort of panel of advisors and assessors as part of that process, who are involved not only in the sort of oversight of the stewardship of any money, but also in the sort of assessment, monitoring and evaluation, and how a structure would balance all of those things. So our sights are set high. We don't have an exact figure in mind about what that target of that fund should be, but as a rough guide, the thinking at the moment is in the region of 30 million would be a good start. And this would include such things as investment in enabling a baseline for the doubling nature agenda. And we already have a strong proposal for that. And this has been developed working very closely with all of the Natural Cambridgeshire partners, the Wildlife Trust, Hannah here today, the National Trust, and everybody else that's around the table, and the National Natural Cambridgeshire Board. £4 million for community grants, projects and grants. We really think that supporting that bottom-up approach is absolutely key for the place making, the change making, and also weaving in not just the valuing of nature, but the understanding of water and water resource management, the net zero agenda, and increasingly the food networks as well. And I think those four things all link together, and nature can be a really, really critical and strong key there. 2.5 million for key projects within each of the 6 priority landscapes to support land purchase, capital grants, access improvements and health and well-being. 2 million for wildlife friendly farming initiatives, 4 million for urban greening projects, and 5 million endowment to attract a further 5 million that would generate an ongoing income to support nature in perpetuity. I mean, these are just rough, this is early thinking, it's all to play for. There's so much we don't know at the moment in the policy and environment and the political environment. And so, but we're all working together to work out how we can underpin nature's recovery here. So as we know, nature does not know administrative boundaries, but I think together we've got the ingredients here that we can really push through. We've got Bridget's leadership here as well to help us all pull this together. So thank you very much, Bridget. You know, we're beginning to look at setting the stall out. We want to make that easy for donors, investors to give us their money. We want to make that, ensure we're developing well-developed projects that can be managed and delivered effectively. And we want the administrative mechanisms that are in place to support both the project development delivery and the investment, attracting the investment. So that's
thank you, Helen. And yes, so 30 million is the figure I've been banding around when I've been talking to people. I think it's a start. I don't think it's the end, but you know, we've got to aim high. Okay, so I'll thank you. Our last speaker is Andrew Mcdermott for Neem Park Trust, who's actually going to tell us about how you get the money. So over to you, please, and then keep the questions coming, and we'll do a quick question session afterwards. I think we're just about on track. Thank you.
Hi, Bridget. Thank you very much. I'll try and keep to time as much as I can. And good to see some names I recognise, but with only a few people with the cameras on, it feels like a nice intimate conversation. So I hope they don't overshare on the complexities of getting money. But I know there's some experts in the room as well, so I don't want to patronise those of you that know a lot about it. But this has come off the back of a Heritage Fund grant that we've recently got. I think that's really what whetted certainly Helen's appetite. And I could talk for hours about that, but I'm going to try and pick out just a few key things to reflect on our learning over the last couple of years. But really, it's been a 5-year process to get to now the point of having received delivery funding for another 5-year project, which will have a legacy that lasts long beyond that. So it's a long old process. So yeah, five points that I've tried to pick out on. So the first one that I put down is a clear strategy and subsequent alignment with the funder priorities. So we spent a lot of time back in 2015-16 developing a master plan for Neem Park. And whilst in the back of our minds, maybe we had various funding sources to support that, fundamentally we were trying to really understand what our purpose was and what we're here to do and what opportunities there are for us. And that has placed us well, not only for a successful Heritage Fund application, but also for a range of other funding opportunities that have come up. I think all those who apply for funding know that you might spot a bid on a Friday afternoon and think, oh bloody hell, the submission date's on a Monday, I'm going to just rattle something off on the weekend. And you know, sometimes that works, but when you're talking about serious money, having well-developed ideas long before you even start to put the funding application together is a really positive step. And then a genuine strategy that's really meaningful lines up with that genuine alignment with the grant funders, which I think on bigger sums have the opportunity to build relationships with funders and ensure that you're both working towards the same thing. So, for example, capital is something that can be quite difficult to do, and there's always an appetite for getting funding for capital projects, but really being very selective about what capital goes into these bigger pots and making sure that really the selection of that capital is around what's impactful and not what might be nice to have. So yeah, clear strategy and alignment. Number 2, community co-creation. So Gavin is all over it. Carly's mentioned it. You know, it's really, really important to us at Neem Park, and it's incredibly fundamental to getting money from funders like the Heritage Fund, the lottery, and pretty much every single funder in the world now. And so I guess, what's your community? You know, when we're talking about nature and biodiversity, it might be that you have an expert community that support that work, but where we're talking about involving people, particularly some of the points about inequalities that have been mentioned previously, looking at genuine co-creation and involvement of communities and thinking about the different levels that you can do that. So, you know, typically we go out and try and talk to lots of the community. Well, COVID landed when we were in the middle of our key development stage, and we had to really rethink that, and we ended up with several tiers of engagement. So we spent a lot of time talking one-to-one with different community leaders in the city. We were able to back that up with some smaller focus groups, and then when we had windows when we were allowed to get outside again and speak to people, we could then further refine that consultation and that sort of creative engagement by getting a selection of views from a much wider population to really narrow down some of those options. So yeah, I think that community co-creation, yeah, fundamentally important to getting the right project. And if we started that with our master plan and have continued it on through project specific work as well. Thirdly, and again, it was a challenge in COVID, but is to pilot, test, learn, reflect. There are so many things that we might propose in these great applications, and there are all sorts of ways to give them a little try, even on a very small scale, before applications go in. And that's not only good for us as applicants to consider what might work and what might not, but also it's a really positive thing to be able to share with funders. A lot of us would be familiar with thinking about how we're going to evaluate our projects, and there's been some mention of that today. How do we evaluate our impacts? Well, actually, if we can understand a bit of that earlier on, but we can also demonstrate to funders our ability to be self-reflective and to perfect what they're going to pay for, ultimately, I think that's a really positive way. So yeah, whatever scale can be managed, and then reflecting that learning and the subsequent development in applications, I think is really important and was really good for us. Fourth, I'd say don't underestimate the work. So, we, particularly for the Heritage Fund, it was like we did a team PhD, is the best way that I could describe it. We unfortunately lost a member of staff early in the process, and then there was a sort of a core team of 4 and a whole host of other people that work with us. We appointed a project development consultant, and I'd say, if you're looking at big funding, actually there are people who, really understand that some of the technical stuff funders are after, but also in a good team you can divide out the things that might work. So I spent a lot of time working on capital elements of our project. One of my colleagues spent a lot of time on the finance elements. A couple of others spent really invested in the community engagement elements, and actually that enabled us to put it all together. And in the last couple of months of the closing hours, we really knew what we were each working on and could bring that together well. And also, if you're working with a Heritage Fund, you might be lucky enough to have a project mentor. And we had a brilliant mentor called Alison Millward from the West Midlands, who sadly has just retired. But the difference that made was huge. And I think, the voices of all the different people who've spoken today, the experience in the county, developing that shared understanding is really important. And then the last point that I would make is, and this is why partly one of the main reasons I really love getting funding for stuff is not just about the money, but is about challenging what's possible. So as head of development at Neem Park Trust, constantly dealing with change and challenge, and sometimes that's uncomfortable. If it's a challenge, if it's tough, it's uncomfortable, it's possibly that you're onto something. You might be going completely wrong, to be fair, but it's quite likely that you're onto something if you're making people feel a little bit difficult about what you're proposing. And that's great for a funder because they want to fund change and something positive. But equally, it's great for you as an organisation, as an individual that wants to do something, because once you've got a funder behind you, not only have you got the money to do it, but you've also got them checking on you doing it. And it's a great justification to be able to say, we're not doing this just because as an organisation or as a parish council or as whatever we think it's nice. Actually, we've said to the Heritage Fund we're going to do it now, so we better bloody do it. And I really do think that makes a big difference in pushing stuff forward. And I think we've made commitments in previous years on previous projects, which at the time felt a bit of a stretch. Sometimes maybe felt they were unachievable, and then we've subsequently overachieved on them. And I think there's lots of research evidence that stretching goals delivers higher achievement. And that's across all sorts of formats. But I think it's really true in this circumstance. And my final thought would be, reflecting on all of that, that if you're trying to get funding for a long-term transformational project, the process to get there should probably be pretty transformational in itself. And it's obviously a painful word. Transformational is used a lot, and it's a bit silly. But as I say, it's been a 5-year process to get to the point now where we've got funding for 5 years. And then already I'm thinking, well, what happens at the end of that 5 years? And Helen mentioned about longevity, legacy, what happens when the funding stops. That's really important. But actually, even if we didn't get the delivery stage funding, which would have been very upsetting, the piloting we've done, the designs we've made, the community connections we've developed during the process of getting to where we are now has already changed what we're doing, and we already would have moved on and changed differently. So, you know, that process to get the money can be as important as getting the money itself. And that'll probably do. Thanks, Bridget.
That's lovely. Thank you very much indeed. That's fantastic. Okay, so we've got quite a lot of questions and not a lot of time. So I'm going to just pick two or three questions, and then I will deal with some of those tricky political issues that have popped up, because I think that's what my job is. Gavin, couple of nice questions here. I'll just conflate them together. So why co-farming rather than allotments? And does it have to be on a nice, you know, bit of open green, or you know, could this work on an enterprise zone or a retail park or something like that?
Well, having had an allotment when I first, in two different places, actually, one up in Cumbria when I lived up there, and then in Cambridge when I first moved to Cambridge, we went through a process of clearing an overgrown allotment, and then my first son arrived just shortly after we'd finished that process, and then it all grew up and got overgrown again. So I would say one of the reasons is that we don't split our sites into allotments is because co-farming is about farming collaboratively with other people from your community, rather than having your own individual piece. And we've also been having kind of lots of discussions with master planners as well, actually, about this. You know, that they're often kind of written into master plans for new developments and new communities as, you know, kind of just allotments. But I think they do deliver, you know, a lot of social value, but I think they don't necessarily maximise it. So co-farming is designed to kind of bring people together, increase social cohesion, and it's about that collaborative process of doing stuff together. So that's the distinction. There was a second part to that question, and I think it was, can you just repeat it?
So can you use, you know, unusual locations, yes, like in an enterprise zone or a retail park?
Yeah, definitely. And in fact, actually, I have been in touch with a couple of people that do, you know, run research parks and business parks as well, because I think in order for co-farming to work really well at scale, which is what we're trying to do, I didn't say actually that, you know, the kind of overarching vision is about 250,000 acres across the UK by 2030. That's what we're trying to achieve. That's when we have to have achieved the Sustainable Development Goals by. And, you know, if you were to look at the kind of output that we're getting off a, you know, very small piece of land, you could actually supply about 30% of the nation's fresh fruit and vegetables off 1% of existing agricultural holding, which is kind of a thought. But no, I think a patchwork of sites, very much a distributed estate. Some of it could be on business parks. I think it all needs to be close to where people live. And I said this at the Food Farming and Countryside Commission meeting on Friday, that, you know, that's also presents us with a conundrum, because I think it's also where the development pressures are also highest as well. So I think making the case for having co-farming where people live is really key. But no, we're very open to doing co-farming pilots on either existing farmland. So some farmers might want to regard it as part of their farm diversification strategy. Some local authorities might have land that they want to put over to this purpose. It might be community-based organisations, or it might be people that run, you know, kind of large campuses or college land. So really, but a key component is it needs to be close to where people live.
Super. That's given me lots to think about. Thank you. So quick one for Helen. You know, we've got, I think, 70. We've had 77 people on this call. There's got to be people listening to you thinking, actually, I could help. You know, I could either, you know, I've got access to a business that might help contribute to the fund, or I might be, you know, I might have a bit of money behind the sofa myself. What should people who would like to actually help you get this fund in place do?
So we are sort of looking at what that would be to set up. We are taking the considerations of people that want to give money very seriously. We want to make it easy and frictionless to give, but we want to then be able to target that money where it's going to be of most use. So if people do have an interest in wanting to either give us money or look at explore opportunities for investment, if you like, then just drop me a line or Richard Astell a line. So either chair@naturalcambridgeshire.org.uk or helen@naturalcambridgeshire.org.uk, and we can feed that into the discussions as we are beginning to develop this sort of architecture of this fund. And you know, co-creation, it's all about co-creation. And I know, having worked in fundraising with Cambridge University and working with some very major donors on some very big projects there, it's all about listening to your investors as much as it is about having the high quality product to invest in.
Thank you very much. And just the final one for Andrew. So Andrew, in a past life, before I did what I'm doing now, I used to work as a fundraiser, and you know, it's very challenging these days, and particularly if you're trying to raise money in areas which doesn't have very highly evidenced deprivation. You know, do you think that for environmental schemes that, you know, that is still kind of holding back the funding, or is the environmental argument now strong enough that you don't actually, you know, you're not going to be disadvantaged living in places that are perceived to be, you know, reasonably wealthy, like South Cambridgeshire and Cambridge City is?
Yeah, it's a challenge. I mean, my recent experience certainly is that funders, you know, like we talk about the direction of government funding being public money for public goods, but a lot of other funders consider their funding needs to be very distinctly aligned with current matters of urgency, so deprivation, diversity, inclusion, which is what many projects then therefore will need to be hung on, or at least sort of led by, or a distinct element of. So it's going to be a struggle in areas where maybe there aren't those issues, and perhaps that's right. You know, I think it certainly is, as I say, from our experience, and given the nature of where we work and the focus of some of our work as a charity, that's what makes funders happy to a degree, or certainly what they're looking for and the key to fund. But I think, you know, in every community there are people that need support. You know, mental health agenda and issues have been raised massively over the last 18 months, and there are a whole range of issues which affect a lot of people, and particularly connection with green space and nature can improve. So I think, you know, there is always opportunities and, you know, angles to consider that in bringing forward funding for green space and public realm.
Thank you, you're quite right. And of course, COVID has thrown up a whole load of problems across the whole country, and actually in areas where perhaps we weren't aware that certainly mental health has been so fragile. So we've got a few minutes, so we've got 8 minutes. So I'm probably going to go 5 minutes over, if you'll forgive me. So I'm very grateful to be asked to do this today. As well as being the leader of South Cambridgeshire District Council, I also lead on the environment for both the Oxford-Cambridge ARC and also for the Cambridge and Peterborough Combined Authority. So it's very much my soapbox. Now, the ARC is highly contentious, and you know, I'm involved in it because I'm a council leader, and I lead an environment because when I became a leader 3.5 years ago, there was absolutely no mention of the environment in the discussions that I was involved with in the ARC. It was all about housing, it was all about the economy. So I felt, because I care about the environment, I really pushed the ministers of the time. I think it was Kit Malthouse actually, to say that there had to be an environment work stream as well, because the question that people in my position were not able to answer was what's in it for the people already living in the ARC. Because what they were seeing, they were going to get a load more houses. They were going to get, you know, they're going to get a railway which looked as if it was going to be diesel, but there was nothing that was going to be improving their quality of life. So fortunately, we managed to create this environment work stream, and I now lead on an environment working group, which is a very, very large group RSPB have played probably the most significant role in it. I cannot give them enough credit for the leadership they've shown there. But we have the likes of DEFRA, environment agencies, water boards, Woodland Trust, you know, Uncle Tom Cobley and all. So it's a very independently minded group, and that's put together a set of environmental principles for the Arc, which have been adopted by most of the councils along the Arc, and which we know have landed well with government. It's really disappointing that they haven't been referenced in the consultation document that government have put out about the Arc. And I absolutely support the press release that the RSPB put out last week complaining about this and saying that the government have got to be far more overt about showing a commitment to the environment and the Arc, to the principle of the Green Arc, and to making sure that the Arc capitalizes on all the environmental opportunities that are there. So I'm involved in the Arc because if I did what other council did and say, actually, I really don't like this, so I'm not going to be part of it, it just means that I'm not part of the conversation. And we will end up in South Cambridgeshire with stuff just being done to us. So it's one of those situations where it's difficult and they're difficult conversations, but actually it's better to be in the room than not to be in the room, because in being in the room, we can influence things. And I think that we've managed to influence things considerably. And in the documentation that the government put out a few weeks ago about their strategy, you know, the Arc absolutely was there. So there are, as we heard right at the beginning of this from Hannah, there are huge opportunities for major green strategic infrastructure. And what we've got to do, all of us, is make sure that when we're talking to government and they're saying that they want to double the economy, they've got to be doubling nature as well. And it's no good that it's an add-on. You know, we can't have housing and jobs coming and then, oops, we'll just do a bit of green stuff as well. You know, the green stuff, the blue stuff has to be as important as everything else, as cycleways. I have a big issue about roads. I don't think, you know, if we're to really make this the Green Arc, obviously we need some roads, but it cannot be predicated on last century's roads. If there's going to be roads, it needs to be roads for sustainable transport, for electric vehicles, for electric buses and so on. So that's my position. That's why I'm involved in the Arc, and I'm very pleased that I can now lead on the environment for the Cambridge and Peterborough Combined Authority, who I think are beginning to find their way in this whole agenda. Now, there's a question early on about the effect of East-West Rail on nature and the environment in the Arc, and what that effect will be. Well, the answer is I don't know. And I've had some very uncomfortable conversations on East-West Rail, where I'm really disappointed by the lack of ambition on biodiversity. They're talking about 10%, and you know, 10% is really easy to miss altogether. So I have had, well, I had few meetings with them because they're quite difficult to meet with. But the one meeting I have had on this subject, I've absolutely pushed them for 20% biodiversity as a minimum. So Nick Sanford's asked how we can ensure tree planting plays a role in the Oxford-Cambridge Arc. Well, the working group that I'm involved with are putting together an environment strategy, and that will form part of the strategies. And we heard back from Sue James about tree and hedge strategies. And in all this ambition to strategy that then become, you know, part of policy. And so we have to deliver on them. Developers have to deliver on them. They can't argue against them on the grounds of viability. They can't be the nice to have. They've got to be part of the must to have as well. I'll pick up the one on enforcement and trees. So councils, you all know councils are strapped for cash. And it's in our area, which is a very, very expensive area to live in, it's really difficult to get planning officers and enforcement officers because it's expensive to live here, which is one reason we need more affordable housing here. So our resources are stretched. I actually think we do, the problem is enforcement is the thing that people complain about when it doesn't go well. You don't hear from all the people for whom enforcement has gone really well and been really successful. And it is the thing that annoys people most. But if we're talking about enforcement over trees and so on, it's not just the responsibility of the council sitting up there to make sure everything goes well. There's a responsibility for communities. So I was until recently a district councillor for Little Gransden Parish Council, and it is little, but one of their councillors was their tree officer. So that councillor went out all the time and monitored the health of all the trees and kept an eye on them and, you know, got action when things needed to be doing. So we've got to start embedding this sort of bottom-up community responsibility as well. And okay, I know if a developer suddenly comes down round and fells a load of ancient oaks, that's absolutely where the council has to step in. But, you know, if we are involving, as we've heard from a number of our speakers today, we're involving our communities in schemes, be it tree planting or new wildlife environments and so on. If you involve people from the bottom, then they have a sense of ownership and a sense of responsibility. So in my village of Gamlingay, some years ago, I worked very hard with the parish council to put in a little country park. And we had a developer who gave us a couple of fields, and we've turned it into something called Millbridge Brook Meadows. Please come and see it. Lots of lovely footpaths and cycle paths. Has really been invaluable during COVID because you can do all sorts of different length walks. Lots of tree planting, lots of repairing work on the stream, which was dead, but actually, you know, children now go pond dipping there. And because the community were involved in the design of that and involved in the delivery, and we were all there planting marginals around the stream, everybody looks after it really well. You know, they all see it as an extension of their own gardens. And then just to sum up, the last thing I just want to mention is in relation to the work that the Oxcam Arc Environment Group's done, but also there's a very, very important group, which is an amalgamation of the 10 universities, and they have their own environment group as well. And I sit in their meetings, which are inspirational. But Professor Paul Leinster, who is from Cranfield, who is when I went to the launch of the ARC back in 2017, before I was council leader, he was the last speaker, and he was the person saying, government, where's the environment in this? So, you know, he has been an inspiration to me, but he is leading on the work for doubling nature on the ARC, and has put together a lot of statistics, which I haven't got time to share now, but I will get a link out to you so you can see actually how little high quality, well managed green and blue space there is within the ARC as a whole. And so, you know, doubling nature actually is very, very achievable there. But it's not just about building great big parks. It's going down to the really granular about what we can do in our own gardens, the trees we can plant, the insect-friendly plants we can plant here. So what we can do in our gardens, in our window boxes, on a parish level, on a district level, a county-wide level, and then an ARC level. So it's really about making sure that we are supporting our communities and, you know, making government deliver on this, making them give us the money. So I'm on an ARC level, I'm talking to people about a £50 million starting point to actually allow us to deliver some of the fantastic wetland stuff that Hannah started off today talking about. So I think that's probably enough from me. Thank you very, very much indeed to Natural Cambridgeshire Partnership, very much to all the speakers who've been brilliant, and thank you very much to all of you who've participated today. Okay, cheerio.
And thank you to you, Bridget, very much for your skilled chairmanship. Thank you for all who have participated. We look forward to seeing you again at the next meeting of the forum, which is exactly 3 months today on the 14th of December. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks, bye. Thank you, bye-bye.
So I don't know if you can hear me. Is the chat going to be recorded as well? Because there were lots of useful links in there.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, because I couldn't write fast enough. Thank you very much. It's very interesting.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.